So Steve, when I first picked up the Numerati, I thought I was very intrigued by the title. You know, it seems almost a little clandestine. Who are the Numerati?
Well, they're not that clandestine, really, but it's an elite group of mathematicians and computer scientists, and they're the only ones who really know how to dig into those mountains of data that we produce every day with our keystrokes and our mouse clicks and our credit card purchases and where we go with our cell phone. And they're the ones who are able to find the little bits of our lives and piece them together and predict our behavior as shoppers and potential terrorists and patients and voters.
I was very interested in one of the examples that you talked about with IBM. They're one of the early adopters of this. They seem to have done a great job of collecting data and making it work for their business. How do they do that? And what's their secret sauce in making that happen?
Well, IBM has a really long history of studying their data to improve their business performance. You know, right after World War II, the Allies had developed operations research during World War II to optimize the shipment of arms to Britain and to keep, to make sure that not too many got sunk by U-boats. So they turned the whole thing into math. And when IBM, after the war, IBM said, let's use the same process for our supply chain. And so they used operations research to optimize their massive industrial supply chain. And that tradition continues at IBM. It's just that now they're trying to optimize their workers.
So what's an example of how they use it now?
Well, IBM, a lot like Dell, has a lot of social media inside the company and outside the company. They have their own social network called Beehive. They have a lot of things that people can participate in, and they have their own sort of Wikipedia even. And so that produces an enormous amount of data that they can use to study the behavior of the workers who choose to opt into the system. They also have a project to model 50,000 of their consultants. And that's more of a test project right now, but they could look at calendar items, at other data that the people choose to let them look at and try to predict the behavior of workers and deploy them as efficiently as possible at the right place with the right team in areas where they like the food even.
So one of the great things about collecting data is that you can then provide more customized information to customers. But then the flip side of that is that people will say there are privacy issues.
Right.
So did these two conflict, or how do they work together?
Well, they can conflict. What I think is going to happen is that we as customers want some kind of customization. We want the companies that we do business with to understand us, to understand our needs, and even to anticipate our needs and our desires. That's not a bad thing for us, as long as they don't take advantage of us. So what I think is going to happen is that customers are going to develop a trusting relationship with a handful of companies. And once you trust a company as a customer, you're going to be much more generous with the data that you give them. And the companies, on the other hand, will give those customers bargains and customized service. And I think every company is going to want to be in that elite, trusted group. Because as customers, the rest of us, we're going to look at the rest of the companies as almost like spammers, people we don't trust, people whose messages we do not want to see.
So you've studied how people want to receive information, what happens with customization of data. If I said, financial savings, security, convenience, privacy, which one of these matters the most to most people from your learnings?
Well, if you ask people that, often they'll say, how could you even ask me such a question? Of course privacy matters the most to me. I do not want my privacy invaded. Most people start from that premise. But then if you say, hey, we'll give you a discount on your supermarket shopping if you take this customer loyalty card and you get a few dollars off every week, they'll say, well, I'll give you the data for a few bucks off. And you don't have to wait in lines at the toll booth to throw in quarters if you put this Easy Pass up on your windshield, but you'll also be telling us everywhere you go. Well, again and again and again, customers make the change and agree to give up a certain amount of privacy for either financial savings, a sense of security and safety, and convenience. And I think that comes up again and again.
It's interesting. That's kind of like a way of customers opting in to participate, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, and that's the way it should be.
Mm-hmm. What was your biggest aha moment as you're writing the book? You know, as you're interviewing people and putting it together, what really struck you that you might not have expected when you started?
Well, I was really surprised as I worked on modeling the voter that one consultancy, Spotlight Analysis, has divided us into 10 different values tribes, and they've gone through the entire voting population of the United States, 175 million people, gone through the consumer data that they can find about us, the demographic data, and they've put us into these tribes that we don't even know we belong to. And then they can sell lists of people in those tribes to candidates who want to hit us with messages that are targeted to each tribe's interests. I found that a little bit chilling.
So what's next after the Numerati? If you had to, I'm not saying you will, but if you were going to write your next book tomorrow, what's intrigued you enough to pursue after the Numerati?
Well, I'm interested in how we as humans fit into global intelligence. If you look at all the networks and all the information that's out there, all of our brains are kind of wired together in a certain sense. And so I'm interested in what does memory mean, individual memory mean, in an interconnected, Google-fied world where information is everywhere. What do you need to keep inside? I'm interested in that.
You know, when you mentioned Google, is that one of the companies you mentioned that some companies are really able to use data to go well beyond kind of the gut feel that a lot of companies employ? Is Google one of the great examples of how that's been done?
Yes. I mean, one of the key trends in the Numerati is that instead of using theory, instead of what you think people will do, or instead of using prejudice, what you've been told they'll do, or even instead of using questionnaires, what they tell you they'll do, you look at their behavior, what they actually do. And Google is a leader in this. They're looking at our behavior, what we're looking for. And then that produces data that they use for targeted advertising. That's a model, that's a very early model of an entirely Numerati-driven company. And we're going to see more and more of them. And more companies are going to develop huge Numerati analytics operations that are going to become central to their business.
That's great. Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate your time.